Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the consequences of the 12-team playoff and how it could kind of affect the regular season and make it just a little bit less special for all of us out there. But with the 12-team playoff, there's going to come some consequences, that's for sure. But let's get into some first-round quarterbacks. It feels like this year there's not many quarterbacks going into the season that we have a ton of hype on. It feels like the three guys that have kind of separated themselves from the pack just a little bit have been Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, and Shedeur Sanders. I think everyone feels like those guys are first-round talent. They feel like they probably will play themselves into that spot this upcoming year. But there's always more first-round quarterbacks than we expect, at least going into a year. There's always NFL teams that are looking to fill out that position. I mean, this year we saw the Falcons do it when they likely probably didn't need to in some people's eyes, and they definitely just wanted to lock up that quarterback. So it's going to happen with some of these teams where they just see a void and they want to fill it and they want to make sure that they're fully set for the future. And one of these guys is definitely going to fall into this group. So there's a ton of guys that I think have the ability to jump into that group. I do want to break down four that I think have the ability to make big time jumps. I don't necessarily want to break down the, veterans of the world, the Jalen Milrows, Dylan Gabriels, all those guys. Some other guys that I think are really, really interesting that definitely will have plenty to say about the draft this next year. And the guy I want to start with is Connor Weigman. I think he is super interesting for the A&M, for Texas A&M this upcoming year. He has a ton to work with at the wide receiver position. I think Noah Thomas is one of the best wide receivers in the SEC. I think he can do just incredible things this upcoming year, and this kid can sling the ball. There's no two ways about it. As long as he is protected, as long as he can stand in the pocket and kind of go through his reads on his time, he's going to have no problem. I feel very confident in that, and I think the really cool thing for Connor Weigman this upcoming year is you look at A&M's schedule, and they have big games. There's no two ways about that. The four big games on their schedule are Notre Dame, Missouri, LSU, and Texas. All of those games are in Kyle Field. That is huge for a quarterback. When you have that energy behind you in the home crowd and no one's bothering you when you're trying to make a snap, you don't have any, crazy things or crazy sound going into your ear, you can kind of just lock in and make the plays. It makes it a lot easier to play big in those big time games. So having those four games, the four that every A&M fan is circling out there, having those be at home is just massive for this team. I think it opens a door not only for this team to succeed, but for Connor Weigman to do the thing that I think a lot of people are expecting him to do this year, which is jump very aggressively in the draft. I think this kid's arm talent, the kid's ability it jumps off the page. There's no two ways about that. He has very good arm talent. His pocket mobility and presence is really, really good, even for a kid who hasn't necessarily played too much college football because of injuries and some different things that have popped up throughout his career. So I think there's going to be tons of ability there. There's going to be flashes where he shows off just how good he is. Now, can he string them together over multiple games and really show off his ability? It'll be interesting to watch that. I think there's a ton that's riding on this year and a ton going into this year for Connor Weigman, and he could take that extra year. He could come back in 2025 and light the world on fire and do just incredible things in his senior season, but this is also, a massive opening for him. There's plenty of things that he can do this year and definitely jump into the first round conversation. So really like this kid. I think the ability is off the charts. I think the wide receiver talent at A&M is a little bit stronger than it has been in past years just across the board. I think they have a really solid offensive line. He'll have time to kind of go through his reads and do the things he needs to do. The one question I do have is how do him and Colin Klein kind of fit together in that offensive game? It's not necessarily the same offense that Colin Klein was running at Kansas State that's going to fit Connor Weigman, so it'll be really interesting to kind of see how that unfolds. But overall, I have very few questions about what this kid can do. Now, will he do it is kind of the big question, but I do think there's tons of ability there. There's tons of arm strength, tons of arm talent, and when NFL teams see that, they get pretty excited. So I'd expect this guy to make a big-time jump, and then the guy, in my opinion, that will make the biggest jump, at least in the eyes of probably NFL scouts, is Cam Ward. I think he's fascinating this upcoming year because right now I'd put him probably at a third or fourth round pick. I think there's a lot of things to like about this kid athletically and has tons of tools. I think there's no question about that, but there's not enough wins in his past to really say this is the guy. I understand that, all of that can change this upcoming year, which is a huge reason he's on this list, but there is kind of that worry. You don't necessarily want to draft a kid that has never had a 10-win season or never had big-time success. Obviously, at Washington State, that's a little bit harder to do than it is at Miami. So it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of change all that this upcoming season. Miami has all the ability in the world to win the ACC. I think everyone understands that at this point. They probably take down Florida State on the way to doing that and be in the national conversation, which is something that hasn't happened down in Coral Gables for quite some time. And if he can get that into that conversation, I think Cam Ward is a guy that can go top 10. And I think the ability is absolutely there. The athletic ability is just insane, frankly. But if he can get Miami, one of the biggest topics of conversation pretty much every year in college football, if he can get them back on top and kind of get that conversation totally revolving around them towards the end of the season, there's going to be a lot of NFL scouts that come calling. I can almost promise you that. There's going to be people that fall in love with this kid because of his athletic ability and because he's just incredible on the football field. But you got to win those games. You got to show that you can do all of the stuff that needs to be done at the NFL level. And he has tons of wide receivers to play around with this upcoming year. Xavier Restrepo, Sam Brown, Jacoby George. It's just going to be incredible what he's able to do, especially pushing the ball downfield, which is likely what you want Cam Ward to be doing. That's usually where he's going to be the most effective, is when he's pushing the ball downfield, being dynamic in the passing game. And he has 3 guys, frankly, that can do really, really good things down the field. So very much like this fit for him. I think he's going to do just incredible things, and he could easily find himself into the first round of the NFL draft. I feel very confident in that. I think if you get all of the ACC's eyes on you, if you win the ACC and everyone's talking about the Miami Hurricanes at the end of the year, it's going to be because of Cam Ward, and it's going to be because he, reached that potential that we've seen over the last couple of years at Washington State. So very excited about this kid. I think he's going to light the world on fire, but the one that I'm watching the closest, the one that I'm very, very excited about this upcoming year is Garrett Nussmeier. I think he is just incredibly talented. I think there's a ability of his arm talent, just in general, is just out of this world. He's played in a couple of different games here and there with some different injuries. Played in the SEC title game a couple of years back when Jaden Daniels went down and did some really, really good things in that game. I think he's one of those guys that the football just looks really comfortable in his hands. It looks like he was born to throw the football. He was born to play quarterback, and I think there's some of that energy in this kid. He has some of that grit to him. He has some of that edge that you absolutely need to play quarterback at a very high level in the SEC. So I really like this kid's energy. I don't know if everyone saw that video of him talking at practice, but he's a guy that's going to be easy to follow. He's going to be a guy that's going to be a born leader. He already has kind of taken that role because he's been there for quite some time, and everyone knows what he's about, and he did not waver when Jaden Daniels came in and kind of took over the starting reins there. So he's an incredible kid. I think he has every ability to just launch up the charts this year. I mean, the offense is going to be incredible. You have Kyron Lacey, CJ Daniels, Mason Taylor is one of the best tight ends in the country. So he's going to have plenty of elite targets. He's going to have plenty of ability, and he has a great offensive scheme with Cortez Hankton and Joe Sloan kind of taking the reins there. It's going to be okay. I think that offense is going to be incredible, and Garrett Nussmeier is going to be at the very center of it. So very excited for what this kid can do. I think when you look at LSU this year, there's tons of upside. There's a lot of ability there. Obviously, the defense is the big worry, but if you can put up a, Jaden Daniels type season, he's not going to run the ball the way Jaden Daniels did. I can almost promise you that. But if you can put up a season that, puts up crazy stats and kind of tries to drag this defense as far as he can, they're going to do a lot of really incredible things. It's going to be awesome to watch this team unfold, and Garrett Nussmeier is going to be at the very center of the party. So just cannot wait for this kid to kind of get his hands on the reins because he's been waiting for quite some time, frankly. But it's going to be incredible to watch all of these guys kind of unfold. Another guy that I think is really interesting to watch this upcoming year is Miller Moss. I think with Lincoln Riley, that dude just filters quarterbacks into the NFL. So I would not necessarily be surprised if he took that step forward and really made some noise this year. I think we know about Carson Beck. We know about Quinn Ewers. We know about Shadur Sanders. Those guys, I feel fairly confident, are going to be first-round picks. I think they have the ability. I think Shadur Sanders is fighting a little bit more of an uphill battle because they're not going to have the best record in the world. And he's going to get hit sometimes, and he's going to have a little bit more of a fight on his hands. But I think the ability speaks for itself when we talk about Shadur Sanders. And then you have the guys that I just broke down. I think I would lean Garrett Nussmeier to kind of make that big-time leap, followed very closely by Connor Weigman. But I think there's tons of other guys. Brock Vandagriff could make a huge jump this upcoming year at Kentucky. Drew Aller is a guy that everyone's talking about. Cade Klubnik is another guy guy that can make that big time leap. And then you have the veterans. You have Jalen Milroe, you have Brady Cook, you have Dylan Gabriel, tons of guys that can. Will Howard's another one. So there's plenty of guys that can make that big time jump. I think Jalen Milroe is a guy that will make that big time jump and possibly become a first round quarterback. So tons of guys to watch. But I think those guys that I broke down are, most in line to make that big time leap. Not necessarily, take that one step forward into the first round, like maybe a guy like Jalen Milroe, but maybe take that leap from the fourth round or from not necessarily starting too much a year ago to being the big time guy and maybe making that leap into the first round. So really like this quarterback class, although it's not necessarily the most, star-studded in the world and doesn't necessarily have a Caleb Williams in it. Has plenty of guys that can really spin the rock and plenty of guys that have great pocket presence, including Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, Connor Weigman, Garrett Nussmeier, tons of guys that can do just really incredible things in that pro style type of offense. So very much like this group. I think it's going to surprise some people this upcoming year. But let's take our third break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about recruiting a little bit. There was a ton of stuff that happened over the weekend as well as last week that I want to break down for you all. So stick with us and we'll be right back with that.